So hi there, writers and teachers, EDU 540, all around good people. Great to have you with me this morning. So we're going to look at, today we're going to look at mini lesson number 3. And essentially we're going to be focused on two things, hopefully pretty quickly. One is the idea of writer's workshop, and you're going to be developing some of those ideas through your own workshop groups throughout the course of the semester. And the second is the idea of audience, because since we're looking at workshop and since we're looking at working with different colleagues on different pieces of writing, we're really aware of the fact that we're communicating to an audience of people. And in our workshop group, I want you to consider the other people whom you're working with and think about them as the audience. Audience is critical to know. And I'm also going to be an audience for you this week during our conferences, and I'll talk a little bit about that toward the end of the video. But first, I want to touch on the idea of writer's workshop. So chapter 1 in Tompkins is just an outstanding overview of what writer's workshop entails and why writer's workshop is important. So read through the process, read through the different strategies and ideas that go along with those 5 stages in the writing workshop process. In the writing process, there's pre-writing, there's drafting, there's revising, there's editing, and then there's publication. One of the important things I think that Tompkins points out too is that although we as writing teachers sometimes focus on kind of, work in the small sentences, grammar, spelling, and those sorts of things, those aren't considerations until the 4th step in the writer's workshop. So as teachers, as we're working with writers, we're really focused in the first 3 parts of the process, the first 3 stages of the process, on really getting ideas out and developing ideas well, using some of the notions that we gathered in our sentence dive and about sentence structure to help students pick and choose various words, develop their ideas to the fullest that they can. And as you can see in chapter 1, there are many, many strategies that you can use. And these strategies are also supported by some of the videos that I put on our Moodle page this week that look at writer's workshop from various perspectives, how to implement it, and some of the ways in which writer's workshop can give us advantages as teachers, particularly as we're conferencing with students in the process. So take a look at those. So what I'm going to ask you to do this week is to start to play with that idea of writer's workshop. I'm going to ask you to experiment a little bit. Don't worry about, you don't worry about not doing it precisely right or the way that, that I might think of doing it. You're really doing this for yourselves. You're finding out what you get from it, and you're kind of getting an idea of how writers communicate with each other and begin and enter into that process of having an audience and being in writer's workshop. So what I'm going to ask you to do this week is to take the writing that you do for the poetry lesson. And remember, there are at least 2 points at which writing should take place. One is during the lesson, so that students can kind of help discover the content and help develop the content in the lesson. And then as a form of self-expression, some sort of exit ticket, some sort of product that your students can walk, your colleagues in your workshop group can walk out of the lesson with. So what I'm going to ask you to do is sort of take the writing you do at either of those ends and extend it a little bit by thinking about what strategies you can use in chapter 1 of the Tompkins to be able to extend that writing, elaborate it, embellish it somehow. And it could be any part of the writing process and any part of any one of these strategies in order to extend that writing and think about that. And I've included some of those ideas in the prompts that I provided you in your workshop. So what would it be like using these responses for the purpose of writing workshop? That's basically the idea. And how can you take one of these strategies to potentially improve your writing or improve your colleagues' writing during the workshop process in response to those poetry lessons? So that's the idea, basically. Okay. And hopefully, obviously, if you have any questions, please ask me. But hopefully that's going to be clear to you and you're going to be able to fulfill those workshop groups and get something out of the process of communicating to one another about poetry and about your writing. So the second thing that I want to just touch on is the idea of audience. And we're going to be conferencing this week, so the idea of audience is really very present for us. Audience is a critical component in designing any kind of a writing. You've got to make a decision at an early point in the stage, really in the pre-writing and drafting stages, who you're going to give this to, who are you going to write this for. Obviously, with Writer's Workshop, we have a ready audience for our writing, and that's also one of the critical features that makes Writing Workshop such a powerful way of providing students with writing instruction. So the whole idea of Writing Workshop is premised on an audience. And in our conferences, with me somewhat as the audience and also maybe something of a helper or an assistant for you, we're going to be looking at two things in particular. And I want you to, if you could, focus on those ideas and focus on these things as we talk. So the first one of these is the whole notion of creating a portfolio, right? So we talked a little bit about this last week in class. For those of you who are in class, I want to bring it up again because I want to make it a little bit more focused from the perspective of the conferences that we're going to be having with one another. So essentially, and I'm pretty sure you can see this, you're going to be developing a portfolio for yourself. But in the process, what I'd like you to be thinking about is developing and working with portfolios on writing with your students. So pretty clearly, like any assessment strategy, you're going to develop the standards, you're going to create whatever objectives and outcomes you may want for this portfolio. And for us, that's fairly loose, actually. In terms of what I'd like you to get out of these portfolios, I'd like you to discover something about writing. I'd like you to find something out about the process. So our conferences and our conversations are really going to focus on that. You are going to self-assess, and in a moment we're going to talk a little bit about rubric development and rubric writing. You're going to need to self-assess your own process and self-assess your own writing artifacts. I'll use that same rubric that you design and develop to help the conversation along in terms of how you would assess your writing and what I think I see about the writing. And maybe the other piece of this is that the various artifacts that you drop into the portfolio, you will have designed and developed in your workshop groups. So you'll have a number of people looking in. Again, that idea of audience, very important. So the audience for your portfolio is really us, and it's fundamentally you, because you're going to be looking at how you design and develop these different artifacts. We're going to share the instrument today in conference. We're going to look at those rubrics, and you're going to kind of check in, and we'll check in on what is going in your portfolios and what kinds of artifacts you're including. There are obviously different types of portfolios. I think we can think of this particular portfolio as a working portfolio until our conferences in week 15, when we'll use it as a display portfolio and kind of an assessment portfolio, and you'll be able to say, here's what I've learned, here's what I've done, here's what I've changed, and here's what I've come away with as far as my writing is concerned. A display portfolio is just literally displaying the artifacts that you've provided. Parent-teacher conferences, portfolios are really useful from that perspective, that you can sort of go through different writing artifacts, go through different pieces of writing with your parents as they come in and show them the kind of work that your students have been doing. So there's a value there. Assessment portfolio, we're looking for some sort of outcome and we're looking for some sort of grade. Yeah, there's a 150-point basis for this particular portfolio that you're designing and developing for this course. But it's really about the experience of what you get and how much you learn about the portfolio process and are able to apply that portfolio process for your own students as well as for yourself. So the assessment piece is, we'll be looking at the rubric. We'll be looking at your writing pieces. We'll be seeing how you did for sure. And again, there are all sorts of uses for portfolios. We're really focused on skill areas, the skill of writing. So we're going to be looking at that in great detail in our conferences. Some questions that you want to think about, some observations about portfolios. Portfolios are particularly powerful because they can show progress over time. And when students see that, they start to learn more about their capabilities because you're not just asking them for one isolated test or quiz or performance that's going to somehow measure a lesson or a unit. The outcomes for a lesson or a unit for them, you're really looking at their development over time. So portfolios are these nicely flexible means of looking at student writing, potentially assessing student writing, but it's good, I think, to assess that writing on the basis of progress, and that's something too that we'll have working for us as well. So, and recognize the fact too, in terms of artifacts, you're going to choose some artifacts. Maybe I'll ask you for an artifact or two. You can also do that with your students. So portfolios are very flexible. They have many purposes. And finally, where they're particularly powerful, you know yourselves that when you reflect on your teaching and think about your teaching is when your teaching begins to improve and when you begin to look at different ways that you can make your teaching better. So the same is true of writing. It allows us, and the portfolio allows us to reflect, to think more deeply about our growth, how well we do, how well we use language, all those kinds of writing questions. So it really does encourage reflection, and reflection, as you know, is a critical feature of learning anything. Great. So that's our portfolio piece. I'm just going to call your attention very quickly now to the other part of the portfolio design and rubric design folder that I left for you in week 3. That's where all these different resources are available for you. So you want to go back and really take a look at that. We know that rubrics can be offered for any number of different performances. We know that there are certain questions that we need to answer before we create rubrics. The rubric that you're going to be designing is an analytic rubric, and I've included templates in that folder. Short and sweet, you're going to look at both ends of the rubric development at the 4 level or at the 1 level or at the 20 level and the 0 level or the 1 level. What is an exemplary performance? You're going to describe that. What is a poor performance? You're going to describe that, and then you're going to fill in the 2 performances in the middle, being adequate performances. Describe what those are. And there's some examples and some ideas that I've also included in some different book chapters and some of Wiggins and McTighe, Understanding by Design, in that portfolio design and rubric design portfolio resource folder that I have for you in week 3. So differences between analytic and holistic rubrics, always good to know. Analytic rubrics, you know what they look like, okay? They break down the specifics of the performance and provide point totals for those different indicators. So this is essentially what I'm going to ask you to do and design for your conference. We'll be able to talk about it, negotiate it a little bit, and then you'll take it forward into your workshop, into your portfolio that you'll be working on throughout the rest of the semester. Just briefly about holistic rubrics. Holistic rubrics essentially combine all those different indicators for a single grade, and that's how they work. So that's sort of a down and dirty review. It should be a review for you on how to write rubrics for your students and how to write rubrics for yourself, and also what portfolios can do for us, and how they can kind of stage an audience so that we're looking at different artifacts and we're working on improving our writing. So that's it. I'm going to let you go. If you have any questions, let me know. I look forward to our conferences this week, and looking forward to reading and seeing what you do in your workshop groups and what you do on the various discussion boards for this week. So thank you very much. Thanks for tuning in. I hope this has been helpful, and I look forward to seeing you again and talking to you again in week 5 and beyond. Take care and good luck.